All right. So our portion this week is Tetzaveh, and as we continue learning about the Mishkan, the desert sanctuary, and specifically this week, the focus on the Kohanim and the vestments for the priests. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're on page 503 in the Eitz Chaim. Whatever edition of Chumash you're using, look for Exodus chapter 27, beginning with verse 20, or just the table of contents for Tetzaveh. And there's an interesting note below the line about this portion. So if we just go straight there, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. This parsha continues the theme of furnishing the tabernacle as the place that will represent God's presence in the midst of the Israelite camp. There's the oil and really for the Ner Tamid, the eternal light, and then it quickly picks up with, it then describes the role and the investiture of Aaron and his sons as Kohanim, ministering priests in the tabernacle. This parsha, now this is what I wanted to talk about. This parsha is the only one in the last 4 books of the Torah in which Moses neither is named nor is speaking. So, right, if we think about this, from the beginning of the very first portion in Exodus, all the way to the end of the Torah, Moses is there. So, in some form or another, either in the first portion of Exodus, where we're learning who he is and God speaking to him at the burning bush, till then he becomes the leader, and then every single portion, God is talking to him, and then Moses is speaking to the people, and sometimes is doing some things too. Okay, this is the only portion where Moses is called, "Hey, you." The very first word, "Ve'ata tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael." You shall further instruct the Israelites. So the "you" is God speaking to Moses, but Moses isn't named. In other words, it doesn't say "Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor Tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael." It doesn't say that. In almost all other portions, it's God spoke to Moses saying, speak to, command, do this, do that. In this portion, it's just essentially, "Hey, you." So that, and I don't mean to demean Moses or the Torah in any way. I'm just saying that. So so now there's midrash about that, of course. Noting this literary curiosity, some commentators explain it as Moses' generously stepping aside to let the spotlight fall on Aaron and his priestly functions. So from a purely homiletic teaching standpoint, if the portion is about the Kohanim, let there not be any confusion about Moses's role vis-a-vis the Kohanim, right? Because there could be some confusion, right? Moses is the leader of the people. He's the political, military leader of the people, but he's not the worship leader of the people. He and his brother Aaron are both Levites, right? They are from the tribe of Levi. But Aaron is the one designated to start a subsection of the tribe of Levi known as Kohanim. Okay, and Moses is left out of that. Aaron is chosen to be the Kohen Gadol, the first high priest, and by being Aaron's brother, you would think that Moses would be a Kohen also, and he's not. So here to provide a clear differentiation between Aaron and his children and future Kohanim and Moses, the rabbis are teaching us that for that reason, Moses's name is left out, so that there would be no question at all that this is all about Aaron and future Kohanim. Now, there's to further emphasize this point, the Midrash continues. Others, some on 503 below the line on the left-hand side, others point out that the traditional date of Moses' death, the 7th of Adar. So that's just what the tradition is. How they derive that, it doesn't matter. It's just, it's the accepted date for when Moses died was the 7th of Adar, okay, which just happened to be this past week, right? It was Tuesday. Tuesday was the 7th of Adar. So the 7th of Adar always falls during the week in which Tetzaveh is read. Okay, so Tetzaveh is read this coming Shabbat, but it's also last Shabbat afternoon, Monday and Thursday. It's all Tetzaveh, right? So 7th of Adar, right in between Monday and Thursday this week. So it was yesterday, just saying. So yesterday, right? Is it? Yes. Today is the 8th of Adar. Yesterday was the 7th of Adar. So it always falls during the week in which Tetzaveh is read. They, being the rabbis, see his absence from the Torah reading like his virtual absence from the Haggadah as part of an effort to ensure that no cult of Moses worship would ever arise. So if Moses' name was in this parsha, which always falls during the week in which his yahrzeit is observed, then maybe we would take this parsha and make it into this whole memorial for Moses. And that is not what the rabbis wanted to do. We have no idea where he's buried, right? There's no pilgrimage to Moses's tomb. It's just not something that is done in Jewish tradition. It is something that is done in Sephardi tradition and ultra-Orthodox tradition, that people make a pilgrimage. Like you got the Bratslaver Hasidim who go to Ukraine, Uman, the town of Uman in Ukraine, where Nachman of Bratslav lived. So there, for the high holidays every year, there was a large contingent of Bratslaver Hasidim, Bratslaver being from Bratslav, where Nachman of Bratslav was, either he was born or raised. So Uman is just another town in which Nachman of Bratslav either lived or at least died. So these Bratslaver Hasidim every year, except for last year because of the war, would go to that town. So there are pilgrimages, and Elijah the prophet supposedly is buried on Mount Carmel. So there's a supposed tomb there that some Sephardi Jews go to. And then there's also Shimon Bar Yochai's tomb in Meron, and then some rabbis also in the city of Tzfat. So there are people who do make pilgrimages to tombs, but it's not a normative Jewish practice to do. So, and certainly it's not there. We don't have a cult of personality, right? So in Catholicism, every day is a saint day, and people in the Catholic Church pray to a particular saint for intervention. Some people will have a Saint Christopher medal hanging from their rear view mirror to protect them in the car, right? So depending on the religion, there is this cult of personality that is part of it, but clearly for Judaism it's not. So it's not just because his yahrzeit was yesterday, but also it's related to the Haggadah, of course. Moses certainly was a main actor in that story, but for the Haggadah, for the religious lesson that we're supposed to be learning from it, it's God who is the chief actor in the story, and that's our focus. So I just wanted to bring this up and just remind us about this portion Tetzaveh, about yesterday being Moses's yahrzeit, and about how just this anomaly of the fact that Moses's name doesn't appear in the parsha at all. Now we should say that this portion is beginning with verse 20. The portion could very well have begun in verse at the start of chapter 27, which is back on page 496, right? And even if it started there, Moses's name still wouldn't be in the portion, but still, it's kind of arbitrary how the portions are divided, as we know. And if we just look in Truma, I'm just looking through the portion of Truma, Moses's name is only in the first verse. So in Truma and Tetzaveh, Moses's name only appears in the very first verse of Truma, which is on page 485, chapter 25, verse 1. So from 25 to the end of Tetzaveh, Moses's name isn't here. And then I'm just looking at Kitisa, which is the next portion. There's Vayidaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor. Now, Kitisa also arbitrarily starts at verse 11 of chapter 30. It didn't have to start there, because it's still a continuation of more things that are being designed for the Mishkan. So it could have, Tetzaveh could have ended with verse 38 of chapter 30, and then start Kitisa at chapter 31. So for some reason, the rabbis decided to divide the portions this way. So which came first? Moses's yahrzeit, knowing that it would be the 7th of Adar, knowing that it would always be when Tetzaveh falls, and then the rabbi said, oh, in his memory, let's have a portion that doesn't have Moses's name in it. Or did the parsha then get divided, and the parsha always falls around 7th of Adar, and then, oh, Moses's name isn't in this parsha. Let's say that Moses's yahrzeit is during this week. Let's make it the 7th of Adar. So I don't know which came first, Moses's yahrzeit and then dividing the portion, or dividing the portions and then deciding when Moses's yahrzeit would be. So don't know, and I'm not sure it matters, but it's just they're equally in the mix of the rabbis determine how the portions are divided. Rabbis also determine yahrzeits of biblical figures, and then make the appropriate connections between them all. Okay, so the first verse, or 503, V'ata tetzaveh et bnei Israel, you command the people of Israel, v'ikhu elecha, take for you, shemen zayit zach, katit lamaor, shemen zayit zach katit lamaor. You should take for you pure beaten olive oil for lighting. Laha'alot ner tamid, in order to, it says for kindling lamps regularly, laha'alot ner, to raise up the light continually. Now, is it in a particular form that we're used to as the ner tamid? If I switch, no, you can't see my background here because I don't have a green screen. But you know what the ner tamid in our chapel and in our sanctuary look like. Is that what is hanging in the Mishkan, or is it the menorah really that's supposed to be lit continually? Okay, I think from the context it's the menorah, and only later, after the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, does every synagogue then have a Ner Tamid as a reminder of the original Mishkan. Okay, so our Ner Tamid is a direct substitute for the original lights that kept burning in the tabernacle from 3,000 years ago. Okay, so by looking at the Ner Tamid, not only does it represent God's presence, and we'll talk about that in a moment below the line, but it also is historical. So by looking at the Ner Tamid, no matter how it's fashioned, go to any synagogue, and every synagogue, they all look different because they're all encased in a different kind of artistic representation, just like a mezuzah case on your doorpost. Every mezuzah looks different too. So it doesn't matter what the case is. It's what matters is on the inside. So what matters is that there's a light bulb in there, or there's a yahrzeit candle, or some other kind of light burning in there, which is supposed to be this direct reminder of the light that was in the Mishkan. So that history comes to life when we look at the Ner Tamid, as well as spirituality comes to life, in that helps us feel as if we are in the presence of God. Okay, so let's look below the line where it says chapter 27. The first section of the Parsha deals with the lighting of the menorah. This tradition is reflected in today's eternal light, the only commanded practice associated with the ancient tabernacle that is still with us, right? So we have this is the only direct thing that we have in synagogues today that is a continuing practice since the Mishkan, right? We have no sacrifices. We don't have Kohanim dressed in these vestments. We don't have any other tools used in the Mishkan that are used in synagogue today, right? We don't burn incense, which is interesting why we don't do that. The incense could be something that's independent of the temple in Jerusalem, but according to the rabbis, there's a particular recipe for making that incense, and that recipe, well, it hasn't been forgotten. It's in the Mishnah, and in an Orthodox prayer book, it's in the section of the Shabbat morning service that's right after Ein Kelohenu. If you were to open an Orthodox prayer book to that point, we just have this paragraph that has a little midrash about students and Torah study. That's a conclusion of a lengthy section describing how incense is made. Because the last line of Ein Kelohenu, Atahu shiktiru avotenu lefanecha et ketoret hasamim. You are the ones who offered incense, and the ketoret hasamim, the incense of these spices or herbs, or however you want to translate that word. I mean, in modern Hebrew, samim is drugs like LSD or heroin. That's what samach mem is in modern Hebrew, but in rabbinic Hebrew, it's something it's more related to incense. So then in an Orthodox prayer book, it has a section from the Mishnah which lists the ingredients for the incense. So the problem with the list of ingredients is that we don't know today, scholarship-wise, how to translate those words and what exactly they are related to. And even if we could figure out exactly what products are listed, we don't know the appropriate formula, right? It doesn't say 1 teaspoon of this, 2 tablespoons of that. It just lists them in order. Okay, so for the rabbis, we don't know how to make the incense anymore. Maybe that's the reason why we don't have incense in the synagogue. So, because that is something that is found in other mainstream religions. You can picture in Catholic and also Orthodox Christian churches, incense is used. I believe in Muslim worship, there could be incense there too. I'm not sure, but incense could be part of the Islamic tradition as well. And certainly in Far Eastern religions, incense is used, whether it's Hindu, Shinto, Buddhist, there's incense there. So the aroma is, it's a way for all of the senses to be involved in communication and worship with God. So it's interesting that we don't have something with smell aside from the etrog. That's part of it's part of Havdalah, of course. So Havdalah, every week we're smelling the spices, right? And we have the etrog, but every day incense burned in the temple. So the Ner Tamid then is the only thing that remaining that is a direct connection to the Mishkan. So the commentary continues, last line on the left. Why has light been such a favorite symbol of God? Right? It doesn't say here necessarily that the light is a reminder of God's presence. It just says that we're supposed to light it. Right? Verse 21, Ba'ohel moed michutz la parochet asher al ha'idut ya'arochoto aharonu vanav me'erev ad boker lifnei Adonai chukat olam ladorotam me'et b'nei Israel. Aaron and his son shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain which is over the ark of the pact to burn from evening to morning before the Lord. It shall be a dew from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. All right, it doesn't say why, but we understand, it's always been understood that it's a reminder, a physical reminder of God's presence. We light the light, then God will be there. And if the light goes out, then God goes away. So why has light been such a favorite symbol of God? Perhaps because light itself cannot be seen. We become aware of its presence when it enables us to see other things. So that's a bit deep and philosophical there. That light itself can be seen. It's only when in an appropriate situation that you can see light. Similarly, we cannot see God, but we become aware of God's presence when we see the beauty of the world, when we experience love and the goodness of our fellow human beings, right? So just as light is not always seen, but when it is, we're aware of the power that it has to affect our life, mostly for good. So too, God's presence, we're not always actively aware of God's presence until we are reminded of it, or we are involved in doing something that's supposed to help us remind us of God's presence. So the Ner Tamid helps us be that symbol so that we can, as human beings who are not by nature spiritual, right? We have the capacity to be spiritual, but we're not instinctively spiritual. We need help to do it. Some people need more help than others to be spiritual. So we wear a talit when we pray. We wear a tefillin during the week when we pray. We have a mezuzah on our doorposts. We do all of as many of the mitzvot as possible. We pray 3 times a day. We have the Ner Tamid in the synagogue. We have Torah scrolls in the ark. All of these serve as a multitude of reminders of God's presence. And even with all of that, our minds get distracted when we're in synagogue during services, so that we're not 100% totally focused on what we're supposed to be doing, which is trying to connect to God. So that's just by nature the kind of people we are. I mean, that's what human beings are, that we're easily distracted and we're not easily spiritual. So then we need all the help we can get, and Ner Tamid is such a help. Similarly, fire has been used to symbolize God's presence. Like light, fire is not an object. It is the process of liberating the energy hidden in a log of wood or a lump of coal or some oil, even as God becomes real in our lives in the process of liberating the potential energy in each of us to be good, generous, and self-controlled. All right, so this is an important idea as well, right? So fire only happens when we have an appropriate amount of energy applied to a fuel to make fire happen, right? So if you just buy a set of logs from the supermarket, they're just logs. You don't release their potential until you apply a match or some other kindling to it. Once you do, then the potential energy gets released in the form of fire. Okay? So the same too with God's presence in our life. So our capacity to do good, the energy that's in us, which here is being defined as the capacity to do good, is released only when we apply the fuel to it, and that fuel is God. So the motivation for us to do good is the fuel that then releases the energy in us to do good. So that fire in which we're picturing God is that fire that motivates us to do good. So, and then that paragraph ends, if light is the symbol of God, then fire, the product of human technology, represents human efforts to bring the reality of God into our world. Okay, so I think this is just important to share about this Ner Tamid. So I also want to say it in this way. There's not much commentary to this portion, and certainly when we get to the repetition of these, of Truma and Tetzaveh in Vayakel and Pekude in a couple of weeks, there's going to be even less commentary there, because we could get bogged down in the details, like how these things are supposed to be fashioned and the measurements and things like that. So the rabbis had, and we'll see this and we have seen it in the book of Vayikra also, about the description of the sacrifices. So there's a lot of detail there that doesn't seem to be ripe for commentary. So the rabbis had to stretch the content here in order to find, in order to find something to comment on. Okay, and so here the Ner Tamid is one of those things, whereas not so much with the material used to make the vestments. Okay. So I wanted to see, okay. There's commentary below the line on page 504 that I wanted to share as well, about why do the Kohanim need a uniform? So here, start of chapter 28. Ve'ata hakrei ve'lecha et Aharon achicha, and you bring toward you Aaron your brother, ve'et banav ito, and his sons with him, mitoch bnei Israel, from amongst the people of Israel, lechahano li, to minister to me, to be a Kohen to me. Aharon, Nadav, ve'Avihu, Elazar, ve'Itamar, bnei Aharon. Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar, the sons of Aaron. And verse 2, Va'asita vigdei kodesh li'aharon achicha lechavod u'letifaret. Make holy garments for Aaron your brother. Why? For kavod and tiferet. So I would translate those two words for either respect, kavod, respect or honor, and glory. Tiferet would be glory. So it's translated here, dignity and adornment. I think tiferet is more than adornment. I think we should apply the word glory to it as well. So it's a glorious adornment. And the kavod, it's translated here as dignity, but it also could be presence, like kavod Adonai, Baruch kavod Adonai. Blessed be the wonderment of God's presence. So kavod is a word that's filled with a lot of meaning. So in modern Hebrew, kavod, you start off a letter lichavod, so dear. Kavod could be simply honor. Kavod harav, for if you're addressing the rabbi of a synagogue. Kavod harav, the honor, it's like His Excellency or his his honor when addressing a judge. It's that kind, but it's even deeper than that. It's an honor afforded to the presence of God. So wear these holy garments in order to elicit kavod and tiferet. It's supposed to elicit feelings of honor and glory. So that in and of itself could be a reason why Aaron and his sons and future Kohanim can't just wear street clothes in doing the work they're doing. There's no such thing as business casual when working as a Kohen. You have to dress in this particular way, because not only for the transformation that it does in the person wearing it to feel kavod and tiferet, but also for the people watching to have a sense of kavod and tiferet too. So everything about their garment is supposed to be symbolic to elicit these strong, very strong spiritual feelings. Okay, so that could also lead to how we are supposed to dress when we pray. So this worship service being described here is filled with action. There's sacrifice. There's animals being offered. There are birds being offered. There are handfuls of grain being offered, all in a very particular way, with incense being offered up at the same time. So it's a very rigorous and very choreographed kind of service so not only are what's being done choreographed, but also the people doing it. There's a strict choreography, and then what to wear when doing it. So the people bringing the sacrifice don't have to be dressed in a particular way. They have to be completely pure, right? They have to have gone to the mikvah and ensure some kind of purification process. So they have to be pure. But the clothing they wear of the average Israelite bringing a sacrifice, that's not important. It's the Kohanim, the people who are actually making the sacrifice happen. They have to be dressed in a particular way. So since there is no temple today, and our form of worship is supposed to be a reminder of the sacrifices happening, we pray 3 times a day, just as offerings were offered twice a day, and the altar was kept burning at night. So that's an element of why we pray 3 times a day. So perhaps maybe we're supposed to dress in a particular way when we pray. So depending on the community, right? This could be why the ultra-Orthodox have a very strict dress code in wearing white shirts and black pants. So the ultra-Orthodox do that in order to ensure proper conduct, right? So there's something to be said about a uniform. Yes, Barbara.
But the costume that they are wearing is the same costume that the Polish elite wore back in the 1700s.
Of course. So yes, understood. But the origin, yes, is Polish nobility. But the ultra-Orthodox took it over and said, this is going to be our uniform. This is how everybody's supposed to dress. And by wearing this particular uniform, it's supposed to create a particular kind of behavior by the person wearing this uniform, right? So that's why some schools insist on a uniform for students so that there's no competition. There's no, I'm better than you because I can afford this, I can afford these fancy clothes and you can't. So how it extends to modern Orthodox is that there's some people who say, so white shirt, black pants are for the ultra-Orthodox as the standard uniform to elicit this kind of spiritual attitude all the time. But those who are not ultra-Orthodox would suggest that there's a certain level of dress that should be required for coming into synagogue. So I'm not sure all modern Orthodox say this, but there are some in the Orthodox community who would insist on wearing that you can't wear shorts, you can't wear sneakers in coming to synagogue. You certainly can't wear them to lead others in prayer. So there's so depending on the denomination, there's more of an emphasis on a dress code that gets to this idea of why there's a uniform for the Kohanim in the work that they do. It's supposed to elicit spirituality, it's supposed to elicit meaning, it's supposed to elicit another way in which we feel God's presence. And as the portion continues, the Kohen Gadol has something on his forehead that says Kodesh Ladonai, holy to God. There are the Kohen Gadol is wearing 12 stones representing each of the 12 tribes, and on each shoulder there's a stone, and on each shoulder 6 names of the tribes are on each stone. So you got the 12 tribes that way too. So and there are bells that are on the bottom of bells and pomegranates on the bottom of the Kohen Gadol's garment, so we can always hear where the Kohen Gadol is, so that we would be acting appropriately as well. So let's look below the line here to see what the commentary says about this uniform too. This chapter deals with the priestly garments, again drawing a parallel between the creation of the world and the fashioning of the tabernacle. Commentators have noted that God made garments for Adam and Eve after creating the world, and that God describes the special garments to be worn by the priests after fashioning the tabernacle. Is there a special dress code for women in ultra-Orthodox? No, that not a particular color, but rather long sleeves and legs completely covered by the dress that goes down to the ankles. Okay, so it's just that the parts of the body need to be covered, but not in terms of what color they can wear. Right, so God dressed Adam and Eve after creating the world, not right after, but after. So too, the tabernacle is described, and then after that, the priestly garments are described. So if you want to make a connection between creation of the world and creation of the Mishkan, there's that kind of similar structure to the story. But it goes on. Just as humans are the only creatures in the universe who do not rest content with their natural skin, The sons of Aaron, who minister in their priestly office in the house of the Lord, do not serve God in their ordinary everyday garments. And that commentator is Nechama Leibovitz, who is a noted teacher of Torah, mainly psychological insights of the Torah of the last century. So we're not comfortable in our own skin. We always are covered. And so too, the Kohanim need to have special garments to feel more comfortable. But the commentary goes on, a different comment. A uniform simultaneously invests the wearer with special authority, only special people can wear it, and diminishes the person's personal authority. Anyone wearing it acquires a sense of being special, right? So in other words, only certain people can wear the garment, and by wearing the garment, it transforms you into this special person. So the garments themselves have these transformative powers that you're feeling as if you're wearing God in the work. Without these prescribed garments, the Kohen is merely an ordinary individual, and his ritual act becomes a personal gesture. Yes, Barbara.
In the different Jewish groups, does the Kohen now have any special garments to wear when he's?
Nope, not at all. Not at all. Just dressed as one regularly would be for shul. So for Duchanin, the Kohen does not have to wear anything different than any other Jew is dressed.
Yeah. Neither in the Orthodox.
No, correct. Yep, and the Orthodox no special garment for it. I think that the rabbi said these garments are reserved for the Mishkan and later for the temple in Jerusalem. They're not to be worn by average. Oh, it's good because you have to be in a state of purity in order to wear these garments, and we can't be in a state of purity today without there being a temple to bring a sacrifice in order to be purified. So I think that essentially is the reason why. So now let's look to the bottom of page 505 for the commentary in verse 4 as this comment on uniform investments continues. The Talmud understands the priestly vestments as designed to protect human beings against the sins to which they are prone. Right? By wearing these vestments, it's supposed to keep you in a state of purity. Thus, the breastpiece, called the breastpiece of judgment, was meant to prevent miscarriages of justice. The jacket, similar to the word for betrayal, would discourage gossip. The ephod, a coat, also used to decorate idols, would protect them against the danger of succumbing to idolatry. The fringed tunic, the same Hebrew phrase used for Joseph's coat, would protect against bloodshed, as the brothers nearly killed Joseph. The robe covering the entire body would protect them against sins of unchastity, and the headdress against prideful, arrogant thoughts. So this is the idea behind each individual garment supposed to represent something about which the Kohen is supposed to be thinking to uphold all these values. Now, there is one other thing that I just want to share about this. When we put on tefillin in the morning, those of us who wear tefillin for morning services, there's a particular way that we're tying these straps around our hand and on our head. And that when we tie them, we're supposed to be spelling out God's name. So when we tie the straps on the hand, we're making the letter Shin. There's a knot on the tefillin behind the head that's supposed to represent the letter Daled. And there's a knot on the tefillin strap that's around the top of our arm. That's the letter Yud. So Shin, Daled, Yud spells out one of the names of God, Shaddai, which is also the Shin on the mezuzah. So we're spelling out God's name. So the idea that we're wearing God, or at least wearing a garment that's supposed to be reminded, that's supposed to help us be reminded of God, is something that we do all the time. The talit that we wear, that tzitzit reminds us of God's commandments, right? So there are 8 strings and 5 knots representing 13, adds up to 13. And the word tzitzit in Hebrew, every Hebrew letter having a numerical equivalent, the word tzitzit adds up to 600. So 613 mitzvot in the 8 strings, 8 strings and 5 knots that are on the tzitzit string itself. And then how the tzitzit is wrapped is one longer string among those strings. They're wrapped in between the knots 7, 8, 11, and 13 times, which adds up to 7, 8, and 11 is 26, and then there's 13. So Yud He Vav He, the letters of God's name, adds up to 26, and the word Echad, 1, adds up to 13. So Adonai Echad. So when we tie the tzitzit, we are reminded of the commandments, and we're reminded of God. The blue string that's supposed to be on the tzitzit, or the blue stripes of the talit, reminds us of God in heaven, right? So even a garment that we wear today, a talit, and the tefillin, reminds us of God's presence too. So this is what we do today that takes the place of the vestments of the Kohen. That what we wear is supposed to be remind us of God. And again, just maybe I'm speaking for myself, but I think most people, even when they're dressed in talit and tefillin, often get distracted, which is why among the ultra-Orthodox, there are some yeshiva students who wear tefillin all day. And the Talmud talks about that too. They're supposed to wear tefillin all day. You only take it off when you answer the call of nature and when you sleep. Otherwise, you're wearing tefillin all the time. You wear tefillin when you eat, and especially when you're studying and praying all day. So they're only in the ultra-Orthodox is that the case. That and not all ultra-Orthodox do this. It's only if you're studying in the yeshiva all day that you might be wearing tefillin all day. To help, again, you know, if you have these straps on your arm and on your head, then it's kind of hard to ignore that you're wearing that. And because of that, it's supposed to help you think about God as much as possible. Okay, we'll stop here for today. Any other questions or comments? So stop here for today. We'll meet again next Wednesday, the day after Purim. So have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
And thank you.